Okay, so you probably should be able to recognize at least the make of guitar from the bridge and the pickguard. It is a Taylor. So this is a Taylor 114 non-electric. So 95% of these are electric. You'll usually see the controls up here. So this is actually quite rare because they didn't make many of these because the dealers seem to say people don't want them. They want electrics. So this is a Taylor 114 non-electric. So what is up with this little beauty? Well, first things first. Hold on a minute before I do that. So if I go down there and show you the playing action, you will hopefully see that that is like sky high. That's like Everest. That is about, I would say, probably 4, maybe 4.5 millimeters. So that's no good. So what do we do? What do we do? First of all, we look at a few things. So if we look at that saddle, that's virtually non-existent. That string there is literally just touching that before it then goes straight to the hole. So the break angles on the strings are non-existent. So the downward pressure is, so the saddle's really doing nothing because there's very little downward pressure, which means we're not going to vibrate the saddle properly, which means we're not going to vibrate the top properly, which means it's not going to sound as good as it should do. So that's a bit of a warning sign. The action's obviously a warning sign, and then what we do is I take my Indian rosewood straight edge and I place it on the fretboard and I run it up to the bridge, and if you look at that, you can see that is about 1 millimeter below the top of the bridge, and that should actually kiss over the top of the bridge, so that should be able to sit there quite nicely. Okay, so all that together tells me that we have a neck reset issue, which is quite surprising because I think this guitar is only 10-15 years old tops, so to need a neck reset this early is a bit surprising. So I suspect someone who had it before has shaved the bottom of the saddle right down to the bare minimum to try and recover the action here, and it's just not been able to do it. Interestingly, the neck has has relief in it, so they have not pulled the truss rod back the other end. Now I could do that, the truss rod adjustment here, but it's largely pointless, because if I pull that neck back, I'm not actually fixing anything. All I'm doing is lowering action here, lowering action here and lowering action here, but actually I'm increasing the amount of lowered action here. So at some point we're going to get buzz and this is still going to be high. So there's nothing for it. We need to do a neck reset on it really, just to bring it back into life. So let me have a conversation with Taylor and we'll see how we get on. So I spoke to Taylor Guitars. I phoned the Europe division. I don't know whether it's in Spain or it's a Spanish lady. She was definitely Spanish. And spoke to them and said, look, I've got this guitar I've taken in as a trade. It needs a neck reset. And Taylor use a bolt-on system, for anyone who doesn't know. So they bolt the necks onto their guitars. I'm just trying to get out of the way of that light at the top. There you go. So use it, which is a great system because it should just be a case of unbolting the old neck, changing some shim things that they have, and then putting on the new neck. But when I did some research, so this is the first time I've done a Taylor neck reset, and the first time I did some research, there was a huge amount of mixed views with people saying Taylor won't send these out to you, you have to be a registered tech or whatever it is. So I was kind of thinking, well, that's a bit rubbish if they're going to be like that. And then I saw somebody else do a video where they said, actually, it was really easy. I just rang them up and they asked me for some measurements, and then they sent me some shims. So I thought, well, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I rang Taylor up. I think actually it's Netherlands, I think is the factory centre. So I rang them up and spoke to a brilliant lady. And she said, absolutely fine, just give me these measurements, send them through on email, and we'll even send you a saddle if that needs replacing. And the whole experience was probably 10 minutes on the phone, but it was fantastic, I have to say. So I'm going to measure the problem areas of the neck. I'm going to then send an email to Taylor. They will then ship the shims to me, and then hopefully we'll be able to do this in probably about 30 minutes. We'll see. So let me show you the neck first. So for anyone that has a Taylor and you find you get this problem, you may well be able to fix it yourself by ringing Taylor and asking them if they will send you the shims. You'll have to give them some measurements and things like that. And also you need to be confident enough to do it. So on this particular guitar, under here, there are two, I think it's two bolts that kind of hold the neck to the block in this direction. So the two bolts will be coming out of here. I think there's then one, maybe two bolts that are under here up into the neck, which kind of go in here, which then pull the neck down in that direction. So when you take the bolts out and you take this neck off, what you find is there is a wooden block, a thin wooden block, probably about, I don't know, 2.5 to 3 millimeters, kind of thick-ish, and it's thicker at one end than it is at the other, so it kind of maybe angles down slightly. You then have another block which sits in here, and that block does the same thing. It's angled at a certain rate, and what that does is when you put the two blocks in, then when you put the neck back into its groove, it sets the angle of the neck. So I don't know what's happened here, whether the bolt's loosened, whether the shim has expanded or something like that, but it's not right. So we're going to get that fixed. And because of this neck system, you're talking with the right shims, it's a half-hour job. So yeah, so let's see how we get on. Okay, so if you remember when I mentioned that there was an issue with the neck, the first thing, I think I showed this on the video, maybe I didn't, was I held a straight edge up against the fretboard, and what I'm looking for is that it's a straight profile on the neck. To give the measurements to Taylor, that's what we need. On this particular guitar, when I first looked at it, there was a big gap between the straight edge and the frets here, which means that there's too much relief in the neck. So what I've got to do is I've got to bring that bend in the neck back so that it's straight again, so that the wood touches the frets. Now you can just see here, hopefully, that's now what I've got. So I've pulled the neck back in order to bend it the right way to get it straight again. So imagine, the easiest way to think about this is it's like an umbrella. So you've got a curve that's going like that, which means there's a dip in the middle. So when you tighten the truss rod at this end, you'll go, if you remember the rule, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So if we're going righty-tighty, we're tightening the truss rod and bending it back, backwards, effectively. So we're bending this part of the neck backwards like this. So what that should create is this opposite bend that way. So righty-tighty is bending the neck backwards. Lefty-loosey is releasing that tension and putting relief into the neck, which is bending it the other way. So the way to think about it is it's the way you look at the nut. So that's the nut in there. So we're looking at it. So if I want to bring the neck back that way, then I have to righty-tighty. So I need to tighten it this way. Yeah, if I want to bring relief back into the neck and loosen it, I loose it that way. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. If we were looking at the truss rod from this end, we would do the same, but we're looking at it this way. So if I wanted to release tension, I would do lefty-loosey. So I'd go that way. If I wanted to tighten and bring the neck back like that, I would do righty-tighty. So I would do it that way. Okay, just for anyone that's not done this before. So I'm happy now, if I can just take that spanner off of there. Ooh, that's not easy. So I'm happy now that I've got the neck in the right place. And the way to do that is just to hold this straight edge up against. And then what I've done is I've taken a feeler gauge and I've just run the feeler gauge in between these frets and the board, and it just doesn't pass through. Okay, so a quarter of a turn, and I've corrected it. So now I can take the measurements I need to send to Taylor. So let's get on with that. Right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to take a measurement of the 12th fret, the E string. So the low E we can see is sitting there. I think that is about 2.75. Okay, actually maybe even 2.5, which you look at and you think, well, actually that's all right, that's okay. But the problem is not that that's 2.5. The problem is that that saddle is so low that if we use the measurements based on this saddle, we're going to get the wrong action because there's no brake angle or anything there. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually just change that saddle temporarily for another one to then get a truer measurement. So let's try that. Okay, attempt number 2. So I'm using my fret pliers here. Just there we go. That's a bit easier. There we go. Okay, so that to me looks to, yeah, I can see the mark where someone's sanded that right down. Okay, so let's change that for another saddle and we'll see what that does to the action. Okay, so old saddle, so you can see that literally is the same height as the bridge, and there it dips below the bridge. So we'll whip that one out. There we go. And then I've got this new one, which I'm just going to use as a temporary one, and already you can see the difference in height. So I think that is going to make a noticeable difference. Yeah, look at that. Already much higher. That's what we want. So let me get the strings back in and then we'll take some measurements again and see if we can get a truer measurement. Okay, I'm not sure whether you'll be able to see this as clearly as me. But that on the right hand side there, the measurement is 3.5, and actually I can still just see a little bit of clearance over the top of that 3.5. So I reckon this low E is 3.6, and I've done a measurement on the other side which was 3mm. So 3.6 on the low E, 3mm on the high E, which is way off in my opinion, unless you're a slide guitar player. So what does that mean? Well, we're on to the next check now. So I've got to take the strings off again. I've got to take the pins out, take the strings off, and I've got to unbolt the neck so I can then get to the shims underneath, because Taylor also want to know what shims already exist in the guitar. So let's get on with that. Okay, so let me see if I can get that in a shot. So to take the neck off, there are 2 bolts which go into the end block that you can see in there, and there is a bolt which goes up into the neck here. So I've got to undo all those. So the only downside first is I can get why they did it, but it means I've got to take this sticker off, which is the Taylor kind of logo. Let me see if we can get that better. There you go. Which is the sort of Taylor logo sticker. So I'm going to see if I can get another one of those to stick over once I've done the neck reset, just to make it look nice again. So I'm going to try and peel it off carefully, just in case I can't get another one. I've got to reuse it. I think I should be able to get one. So once I've got that off, it'll just be an Allen, not an Allen key, what's the bloody word? A spanner thing, spannery thing to go on the end and get the bolts off. So let's have a look at me doing that on my new wobbly extension arm. There we go. So hopefully, voila. So there is our neck off, and you can see the first of the shims. So that is a 4. So let me see if we can get that out. There we go. So that's a 4. And then down in the heel here, you'll see there's another one that should just slide out. There you go. And that's a 10. So I now just have to wait for Taylor, who are going to send me a couple of shims that should fit. Interesting. I don't know whether you can see there. There's a weird looking, someone's drilled holes in here. I don't know whether that's, not quite sure why that is, because there's no screws in the other end. Not sure why that is. If anyone can explain that to me, that'd be great. So anyway, I've got to wait for another couple of shims to be sent from Taylor in the Netherlands, and then we'll put it back together, and then we'll try and get the action straight and stuff as well. Let's see if we can finish her off. Okay, so we have the shims from Taylor, and they are sorted into numbers, so 24, 22, 20, 18, etc. And then we have corresponding ones for the heel block, which are 30, 28, 26, 24. So now what? Now what do I do? So there's no instructions to tell you how to use them, or how to figure out the right combination and things like that. So I figured out I'd have to do a load of mathematics. So that's what I did, and I came up with all this. So I measured both sides of each, or both ends of each of the types of blocks. So you can see here I've put, this is the square block, this is the heel block, and I've put the thin measurement and the thick measurement, and then I've written them all down for the different ones, trying to see whether that made it obvious kind of what pairs go together or whatever like that. And I tried to figure it out by comparing the measurements of the original set, which again didn't yield anything really. So I was kind of none the wiser after about an hour of looking at these things. And then after watching a couple of videos again on YouTube, I kind of figured out that each pair, so the largest set I have that's the largest in the square ones, and that's the largest in the 30. So by process of elimination and deduction, I realized that must be a matched pair. So then what I did was I started going, right, okay, if that's a matched pair, then that's a matched pair. Let me try combinations of matched pairs and see how we get on. So that's what I did. And I'm pretty sure, I'm waiting for a call back from Taylor where hopefully they'll confirm that. But I'm pretty sure that is the way to do it. So what I've done is I'll get the guitar on the bench and I'll show you kind of what I've done, because I've tested out different matched pairs to see if we can get the right neck angle and stuff like that. So let's have a look at what I did after figuring that out. Okay, so I had the neck off the guitar, and I tried first of all the largest set of shims, or the largest numbers. So the 30 heel shim, which goes down the back of the neck here, let me see if we can get that in, which goes down this back side of the neck, and then the 24, which is the square one, which goes in this plate here. So I put those on and I bolted the neck back up, and I ran a straight edge across to the bridge. And what I found was that the clearance at the bridge, so the height of the straight edge above this bridge, was about, I'd say 2 millimeters probably, which for me, for the way I play, for the way I'd set guitars up, is too high. So what I then did was I went the opposite end and I put the smallest set of shims on, smallest numbers, which if I remember is the 16 is here and the 22 is down the 16 is here and the 22 goes down the heel bit down here. So I tried that, and then I bolted the neck back up again and I ran a straight edge along the fretboard again, and when I got to this edge this time it was about 1 millimeter, which to me is perfect amount of clearance with a new saddle on, stuff like that. So I bolted up the neck properly, put the low and high E strings on it, tuned it up, checked the measurement of the 12th fret, and we've got about 2.5 millimeters. That's without any truss rod adjustment or anything like that. So that for me is really comfortable playing position. So for me, it was a bit of trial and error, a bit of kind of figuring it out, but I've got it where it's lovely playing sort of position now. So I'm just gonna, I've tightened the bolts up, so that's all kind of ready. Apologise for the wobbly vision again. Let me see if I can get that a little bit lower. There we go. So I've bolted the neck with the Allen key bolt and the 2 bolts going into the neck. All I need to do now is get the rest of the strings back on it, and then just give it a bit of a tune up, a bit of a test, and we'll see where it comes out at. But I think that is it. So if you are doing this yourself, the great thing is that Taylor, if you get the neck off of your guitar, if you take the measurements that they ask you for and you get the neck off the guitar and give them the serial number and you give them the shim numbers you've already got in, they should be gracious enough to send you a set of shims to do your guitar. Now that is assuming that everywhere works the same. I mean, I got mine from the Netherlands support centre, factory support centre, which I have to say they were fabulous. A massive plus in my book for Taylor there in terms of service. But they should send you shims, hopefully, and then it is a little bit of trial and error just to see if you can get the right kind of height above your bridge. Right, so strings are on. Let's get it tuned up and see what it plays like. So there we have it. Taylor neck reset is done and finished. I did a tiny little tweak on the truss rod just to get the action at the 12th down to 2.25, which is my sort of perfect playing place given my style. So yeah, so all in all, a really good experience, made so much easier thanks to Taylor and their support. So yeah, see you next time.